you ready to party? Let's go.
Steve Sanderson, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
And you came all the way.
Well.
Where'd you come from?
I came from like Rancho today.
You came from Rancho?
Rancho, yeah.
Dang, dude.
Well, it's better than Ventura or Santa Barbara where I was at.
Yeah. Wait, what are you doing up in Santa Barbara?
I was working for a client up there.
Okay. And then you're living in Rancho right now?
Yeah. Until the move on Saturday to Texas.
Wait a minute. You're moving to Texas?
Moving to Texas.
Saturday
morning.
Bro, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Wow. What spurred that?
I've got some friends out there, and my wife and I signed on a house last year, and it's closing, and we're going to be driving there as it's closing. We're going to get in, we're going to sign the paperwork, and then we should have a house. Otherwise, we're going to be sleeping in a hotel until we do. Yeah.
Congrats, man. That's huge.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't think you're making a big mistake by living in California.
Yeah. We both grew up here, and so it's like, it's a hard transition because we love it, but at the same time, we're married, we want to start a family, and that's getting really difficult to do out here.
Yeah, the price of inflation on everything from homes to gas to food. I mean, rent is so high right now. It's an interesting time, and I think that's why there's so many people leaving. I know so many of my friends that are leaving to Idaho and Texas, Tennessee.
Yeah, Idaho is a place we look to. We really like Boise, like just the climate, the city, the area, stuff like this is amazing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are moving there, and so the population, it's like we don't know what that's going to be in 10 years, and houses are already going up.
Yeah, I would say what's the average house price over there now?
It's probably going into the 400,000 and 500,000s.
Wow,
which is a lot for there.
I was gonna say usually it's probably like half that, isn't it? Usually.
Yeah, I want to say like 2 to 3s was probably average, and it's up above that.
It's interesting because it seems like the landscape of the housing market and prices of where places were relatively cheaper.
Yeah,
it seems like those states are now starting to go up.
They are, and for some reason, California is flooding specific states, but so is New York. Yeah, and maybe it's just because of the closeness to the coastlines, but yeah, and I get it. Like, there's a lot of hatred for Californians moving there, but they sure love the price of their house.
Yeah, I've heard some stories, man. I've heard people moving, like especially Idaho. You know, you're not from around here, huh? California.
Right. I hear a lot of people from Portland are moving to Boise as well.
Oh,
so it's multiple states. I think it's just
really,
yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder why people from Washington, at least Portland, are going over there. You know,
I don't know.
That's weird.
I don't know. I don't know if it's because I don't know the politics there, and I don't know what taxes and things like that they're dealing with as well.
You're right.
But I understand California, but
yeah. Now I know you, or I met you pretty much today because I think it was Mark Serviano.
Yeah.
Suggested you come on here.
Yeah.
How do you know Mark?
I met him in college, probably close to 10 years ago now.
Oh, you guys have been friends for a while then.
Yeah. And I met him. He was actually working there at like one of the student service centers.
Of course he was.
And I was a student. I went late because of the military. I met him, which was pretty cool because he was only like a couple years older than me, but both of us were a good handful of years older than most of the students. And we connected on some music and stuff like that. It's like, you listen to this band? Like, me too. And so we just, ever since then, just been hanging out and got to know each other and stayed friends.
Yeah, Mark's one of those guys where it's very easy to keep him as a friend for a lifetime. He's just a solid dude.
Yeah.
And he cares.
Right.
That's one thing I've noticed and respect about him is he actually gives a crap about you.
Yeah. He was one of the first guys I hit up when I did this book because he had given me his years ago after I met him.
Oh, yeah.
And when I started coming out with this, I was like, man, I would love to do some author swaps with other writers.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to finally do that after that long.
So when you say author swap, is that meaning like you find someone else who's written a book and then you give them
swap
your books,
yeah,
then they give you theirs?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a way of kind of like promoting each other's work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rad, dude.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wrote a book, correct? Which I have here. You gave to me.
Yes.
What's this book called?
It's called Calloused Heart. The subtitle is Navigating the Balance Between Faith and Violence. Wow. And it covers my time in Iraq in the military through the 4 years in the Marine Corps, and then my transition after that through college and just life, and balancing my Christian faith with the violence and two different cultures going on.
Yeah, wow. So everyone can see this. I'm going to turn the camera over here. Let's see if we can get this on there. This is the book Calloused Heart by Stephen J. Sanderson. I would say it's probably available everywhere. Major platforms.
Yeah, major platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Noble online. And then we'll put a link up. But yeah, you can find it. You search the title, it'll come up.
Oh, absolutely, man. And okay, so you went into the Marines right out of high school?
Yeah.
Wow, what made you want to do that?
Well, I signed my contract in 2003. I graduated high school in 2004.
Oh, we're the same age.
Yeah.
So you're 35?
Yeah.
Okay. I turned 36 here in a few months.
Yep, same.
Nice. Okay, right on. So like would you say 9/11 kind of spurred some of that?
Yeah,
too?
yeah. So because that happened when I was in high school, and so 2 years after that happened is when I signed the contract, and I signed the contract the year we invaded Iraq. So it was very fresh, and I knew exactly where I was going because I walked into the recruiter's office and was like, "I want infantry," and it was
wow.
Like, well, you can qualify for this and this. I was like, "I want infantry."
Wow. So okay. Were you able to sign your contract under
I had to have my parents' signature at 17. Yeah, I signed the summer before my senior year, and my parents had to sign. Which, I didn't think about it at the time, but afterwards, it kind of hit me. I was like, if something happens to me, they kind of put their guilt on it because they had to opt.
I can see that because I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision for them.
Yeah.
That's got to be tough. I mean, I don't have children. I do want to have kids one day, but I can't imagine,
Right.
my son
Right.
coming 17 years old, about to start
Yeah.
his life, and he's like, hey, I want to join the Marines. We were in war. I feel the patriotism. 9/11 happened. And
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. That's a heavy decision for your parents.
Yeah. And thankfully they weren't super against it. I mean, but they left the decision to me. It was just like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And it was just like, because if this is what you want to do, we'll sign for you. If you're an adult now or are going to be, and if we don't, you're just going to do it next year. So we're not going to complicate the process.
Yeah. Was your mom at all emotional?
Not through that process.
Okay.
Where she was emotional is when I got out of boot camp and got my tattoo, and she was like, all right, I got some opinions about this.
Look, man, I'll tell you right now, I am covered in tattoos. Trust me.
Yeah.
When my mom was just so disappointed in me. I'm like, whatever, dude, it's art.
She actually is the one that referred me to my tattoo artist. I was like, I don't know what to tell you at this point.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Does your mom have tattoos?
No, she doesn't. But just through a family friend. She was
Okay.
like, well, there's this guy and he's local. And it was like, well, don't refer me to him, and then be there for it.
Right,
But
right.
yeah.
Wow. Now, do you have like a family history of serving in the military?
Not really. Where I did see some protest, at least from what my parents had told me, was my grandpa, because he was the youngest of, I forgot how many, like 7 kids or something like that. But one of his brothers was actually killed on Iwo Jima in World War II.
Whoa.
As I think he was a corpsman, but he was shot by a sniper. And so that's his memory of the Marine Corps. He was in the Navy himself back in the 50s, but his brother was killed in World War II. So when I said I was joining and he saw everything going on, he was more like, yeah, I don't really like this.
Okay.
But afterwards, once I went through it and stuff like that and came back, he was very supportive and flew the Marine Corps flag at his house and was like all for it, So he came around, but everyone, I understandably so looking at it now, because I mean, it wasn't just like joining the military. It was like he's signing for the infantry and we just invaded 2 countries.
Right.
So that's a little bit different than just he's going to go on float and
Right. They know you're going to be right in the middle of the action.
It was like a one-way ticket.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, when you went into the Marines and you said you want to do infantry, so you went through boot camp first, right?
Yes.
And how long is boot camp?
3 months, so 13 weeks.
Okay, 13 weeks. And then after boot camp was when you go to your MOS, right?
Yes. Yeah,
And-
School of Infantry.
And how long was School of Infantry?
It's a little bit shorter. I forgot exactly what it is. It's probably close to 2 months, somewhere around there.
Okay, 2 months. And is there a huge failure rate in that? I mean, do you guys drop out and try something else, or most of them know what they got themselves into?
Most of them know. In that, there's a lot of technicality training. So, I mean, unless someone just mentally can't retain the information, which is very few. I mean, you're dealing with weapons, and most of the guys,
a lot of hands-on.
infantry is like one of the lowest ASVAB stores you need to get in. So and even then, most guys aren't failing out. Like you really got to be like you'd get failed out before you even got in the Marine Corps if you can't pass even that. So for the most part, no. So the guys who aren't are the ones who are just either having medical issues, like they broke something on a hike and have to get medically separated, or there's some kind of disciplinary action. But for the most part, people aren't failing out at that point.
I see. Now, as far as when you're done with being in infantry school, right? You get basic training done, infantry school is done. That's when you get placed in, what would you call it, like a platoon, or
you get orders to the fleet is what they call it, which is your unit that you'll be at for the next 4 years, or at least for the remainder of your contract. Yeah.
Okay.
Your duty station.
Where's your duty station?
29 bombs.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So people know 29, but I'm going to let you talk about 29 palms. You describe 29 palms to everybody if they don't know.
It is barely habitable.
It's the armpit of hell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's hot. It's great training area. Great place to be a Marine for what you do, but when it comes to having time off, there's really nothing there. You're probably 2.5 hours from Vegas, 2.5 hours from LA, which is the only
you're like right in the middle
benefit. You're just kind of right in the middle from either.
But you were still kind of close to home, which was kind of cool, right?
Yeah, because I grew up around LA, so I was able to come home on the weekends.
Oh, that's cool.
So easy transition for me because it was boot camp down in San Diego, some training at Pendleton, and then duty station in 29 Palms, right? And I actually chose infantry because I knew it was going to put me in 3 possible places, 2 in California or 1 in Hawaii. And I was like, those are pretty good odds.
Oh, those are really, see, I didn't know that. That's pretty good odds.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. And how many tours did you do overseas?
2 deployments to Iraq, and then I did a month of training in South Korea.
Wow. And how long were your deployments?
7 months. Yeah, 7-month rotations.
How were those on you, man?
The first one was pretty tough.
I would say it had to be pretty eye-opening as a young man.
Yeah, at 19, yeah.
Wow.
So, because I was in Ramadi by September of 2005.
That was when things were getting hot in there, man.
Yeah.
You were in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So things had kind of picked up in 2003 in Baghdad, and then with the fighting there, it pushed into Fallujah around 04, and then by maybe late 04, early 05 is when things had pushed into Ramadi.
Okay. And you were in Fallujah too?
No, it's just Ramadi.
Just Ramadi?
Yeah. But Fallujah, I want to say, is about 30, 40 miles east of Ramadi.
Okay.
And then you have Baghdad just kind of east of that a little bit. So they're all kind of linear there. And you can see how the U.S. presence started to push the insurgency further out. But Ramadi is a capital city in the Anbar province.
Okay.
So that was a big stronghold for the insurgency over there.
Wow, dude. So your first tour was 7 months, you said?
7 months, yeah.
How was that coming home and trying to kind of reacclimate to normal life? Because I don't think a lot of people understand what our military personnel go through, and not just the extensive training, but what you see and the things you have to deal with overseas and the situations you're put in, the friends that you lose, the wounds that come, not just physically, but emotionally, you know? And trying to come home. That was one thing that I remember from my father. He was in Vietnam for a long time. Then he stayed over there doing contract work as special ops. And it was very hard for him. He spent, I think it was like 10 or 12 years. So he said it took him about 5 years when he came home to really come down off that, always being on the alert and the ready,
Yeah. It was a lot different for that generation too, because they didn't integrate periods of deployments the way they do today. They did a little bit in Vietnam. They didn't hardly at all in World War II, right? Like guys deployed and it was like, well, when's your end of contract? Well, the war ain't done. So, we'll see you when you see you.
Right. Can you imagine if they did that today?
Yeah.
Oh my God, 10 years,
Yeah. Like you're on the island hopping for 4, it's just, it was pretty bad. And they learned from that and realized there's combat fatigue and the rate of PTSD is astronomically higher when you don't give those breathers. So in Vietnam, it was similar. Like guys deployed and they still had rotations, but they kind of just individually replaced guys. So I can see why that would have been significantly hard for him. But yeah, for us, at least today, the way the military is doing it is the Army was doing about a year deployments, and then they'd give about a 2-week leave somewhere in between for guys. Okay. That guys could come home and kind of decompress, see family, and then go back. and then the Marine Corps was doing 7 months deployed, 7 months home. And so guys would typically hit about 2 to 3 deployments in a 4-year enlistment.
That's still a lot.
It is a
I
lot.
feel like that's a lot.
It is a lot, but at least when you're over there and you're deployed and you're constantly switched on, you have that time limit in your head, like, hey, it's 7 months, we're going home. Even though, I'm only coming home for 7 months, that's still enough of a break to come back to see family, to see reality, and so you're kind of getting the taste of both.
Yeah. Man, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So you came back. So when you were there for 7, you came back for 7, right?
Yeah, so the unit I was with, we had been hitting so many deployments back to back to Iraq that by the time I hit my first deployment and came back, they actually gave us a year to be back.
Oh, wow.
Instead of 7. So we were back for a whole year and then deployed again for 7 months. And then by the time they had another deployment coming up, my contract was up. So I didn't make a third deployment with them.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would have. And I think they hit Iraq maybe once or twice more, and then everything shifted to Afghanistan, and they closed out there.
Wow. When you were over there, were you ever wounded?
No. Not physically.
Okay, sure.
I was hit by an IED on my first deployment.
Wow.
So definitely had the brain rattled.
Oh,
but,
man, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So when you say IED, did it flip the vehicle and all that stuff too?
It didn't. I was actually 4th truck in a convoy because we were doing Humvee patrols. I was with a combined anti-armor team, or a CAT team, with a weapons company. And we were driving through an area of like northwest Ramadi, going through this neighborhood, and we're all turning a corner, and I was a 4th truck, and as I turned the corner, the bomb went off and hit the back right of my truck. Yeah, and so it knocked me out for a couple of seconds because it definitely reset the equilibrium, because I don't remember hearing it. I just remember kind of checking out and then looking around, and there was black smoke everywhere. And something else exploded. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember when I looked over to see the smoke, the air conditioning vent popped out of its hole, and there was just a bunch of black smoke that came. So something hit the system and just sent a bunch of pressure into the truck.
Wow.
But when we inspected it afterward, the trunk had been blown open, and there was like probably a baseball size hole through the tire well in the back from shrapnel that had gone through and shredded a whole box of MREs. It had gone through entire case of MREs.
Of course it takes the food.
Yeah, of course. Well, we were going to eat it anyway.
Yeah.
But it also hit the AT-4 that was in there. And the AT-4 is the rocket launcher that we had. And so it put a hole in the side of it. And I think something in that, it set off some kind of pre-charge that blew the trunk open. Wow. And I think I have a picture in the book too of me holding the AT-4 rocket because we had to dispose of it because it was potentially explosive. But if that had actually set off the rocket, it probably would have blown up the truck.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Good Lord, that's intense. And then that was in you said a Humvee, right?
It was in a Humvee, yeah.
So people know the military Humvees are pretty well armored, right?
Yeah.
So for that explosion to happen and have that much damage, there had to be a lot of explosives in there, right?
Yeah, to destroy a Humvee, it would have to be a pretty big IED. And in Iraq, which was an urban theater, it was pretty hard to do because there was just so many eyes everywhere.
What do you mean eyes? Like
people constantly watching. And we also have Marines all over the place. And sniper platoons embedded throughout the city and stuff. So we're watching popular corners. So if someone goes out and tries to dig a hole, they're going to get shot.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so they had to have a hard time. Whereas that wasn't the case in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was so open and with the valleys and mountains and stuff that you could have people go out and dig up an entire road. And so it got to the point that a buddy of mine deployed years after me and was like, we're not even allowed to take Humvees outside the wire, outside the gate. Because they get destroyed.
Oh, wow.
Because the level of IEDs that they were able to put in the ground were like anti-tank mines. So they would either flip Humvees, they would completely destroy them, but they were just, they weren't even recoverable. It wasn't just like the damage we had in Iraq.
That's not even to tell what it's doing to the personnel inside.
Right.
Right. Oh, man, that's rough, dude.
Yeah.
That is hard. Well, I know in the fire service, we have different things like, I think there's one like Counseling Team International and some other ones where they provide therapy and mental health stuff for us when we need it for free. Coming home from Iraq, is that something that was offered to you guys as far as to help you out, to help you deal with what you went through?
They have those services. They've become more advanced over time just because, when in the first couple years of going to war with the country, we weren't expecting the flood of people coming back with psychological problems. So we were not on top of it on that level, but they do have it. You can, for active, they have services and whatnot. And then especially through the VA after, and even private services, the VA can get you connected through that. So they've got them. They weren't the best when it first happened because of the number of people that were flooding the system coming back from deployments with psychological issues, that they were just trying to run through it as quick as possible. So they ended up just prescribing a lot of medications rather than really sitting down and going through the therapy that needed. Just because that's such a time-consuming process, and it's expensive, and the level of strain on the psychologist and whatnot to do that, they just didn't have the numbers to facilitate that.
Right.
And so the easy way was just treat symptoms. And so they pass out a ton of pills, which they've learned from now.
Yeah.
But we've also diminished the amount of guys coming back and have more of an understanding of how to go about it. So it's like not everything was handled the best, but at the same time, it's like I don't want to trash the system too much, but it definitely was not prepared for the real first couple waves of guys coming back from deployments in, the early 2000s. So
yeah, the whole VA thing really bums me out.
Yeah,
that one, that just, it makes me sad because I know I've seen what my dad has gone through and his teammates on, when he was a Green Beret. I've seen my other friends who've come back from war, gone to the VA, and what boggles me is how we can give billions away to these other countries, and yet we can't even support our veterans. It just, it eats me alive sometimes. I'm like, what is wrong with our government where we can't take care of the men and women who sacrifice so much for us, but yet we're going to throw all these millions of dollars at these other countries? I'm like, how is that even fair?
Yeah.
How is this not getting fixed?
Right.
It's crazy to me, man, because I just have the utmost respect for veterans, man. And I think one is being grown up in a military home, but there's a lot where I understand as far as the sacrifice and what it takes, especially for a family, man.
Right.
It's a lot. It's hard, dude. You're gone. All that training, what you see.
Right.
There's just not just physical, but those mental wounds,
Right.
And that's one thing my dad, I know he's talked about. It took him a long time for certain things that he went through to really heal. He's just like, man, I remember him telling me it was all fun and games in boot camp, and he graduated from USC, and so they put him in officer school, and then he went to special ops, and all these cool buddies, and they're the best of the best, and next thing you know, they're all getting shipped to Vietnam, and he's like, 75% of them came back in body bags. He said, I was shocked.
Right.
You just like, reality hits you fast.
Yeah.
It's just like, bang.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, man. That VA thing gets me, but so you did 2 tours in Iraq, right? And then is that when you got out? After that, you got out of the Marines?
I did, yeah. I got out. I just did 4 years, got out in 2008.
Okay.
And then started college.
And where'd you go to college?
I went to community college first.
That's what I'm talking about, bro. Come on. Let's go.
Yeah.
I was poor,
bro. Well, part of it was like not that I wasn't wanting to go to university, but I was just like, I need to see what this is like first, because I'm coming from one culture to a next, and I don't know if mentally I'm there for it.
Right.
So I did 1 semester, and I was like, it's not too bad. The studies aren't that hard. But the culture was definitely different. I was like, man, this is like a high school continuation. Like no one else wants to be here. There's not that camaraderie.
Right.
And so it actually gave me a more drive to want to go to a university, because I was like, I'd rather go somewhere where people are paying significant amount of money and are invested in this. Yeah. And I was like, maybe I'll make better connections here.
Yeah.
So I didn't connect with too many people in community college, but yeah, I went locally out here to Citrus and then Azusa Pacific after.
Okay. How'd you like Azusa?
I liked it. Great community. The student body, everything was completely different than the community college, because it was like people wanted to be there.
Oh yeah.
They were invested, you know, it was a Christian community. So you also had a shared bond with certain things. But it still didn't mean like I got along with everyone. It was still a culture shock, just maybe because of the age difference, because of the life experience. But yeah, but I enjoyed it. I had a great time.
What'd you study over there?
Psychology.
Oh boy, you got some brains, man. That's what I'm talking about. Wow. Are you going? Did you get your master's too, or just bachelor's?
Just bachelor's.
Okay. And then, did you meet Mark in some of those classes as well?
Yeah, I met Mark at APU. He was working at the student center there. I think he had already gotten his undergrad, and he might have been working on his master's at the time.
Yeah, he's a very smart individual.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm working on my master's now. I had to kind of put some things on pause, and to let you. I haven't done a podcast in a little bit.
Yeah.
I think like two or 3 weeks.
Okay.
I just, man, I had some stuff in my private life I found out medically that I had to really get a handle on, dude. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so freaking stressed out right now. The doctor's like, you need to eliminate as much stress out of your life as possible. It's just like, so I told him, like, you guys need to take over for a little bit.
Yeah.
I need to figure this out. But yeah, Mark's a cool dude, man. He's got a big heart, and it's cool that you met him over there. He's such a little fireball, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he's always calling me to bring people on the podcast and stuff. I'm like, yeah, send him on over. That's when he talked about you, and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of stepping back from the podcast right now. I was like, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Forget it. Bring him on over. Let's have a good time,
I appreciate it. Yeah, Mark knows a lot of people. He there was a guy I was working with a couple years ago doing executive protection. I was running an account, and one of the guys I had on that account, somehow we connected through LinkedIn as well, and I saw that he had Mark on there. And I was
way.
I was like, come on, dude. So I had to hit up Mark. And I was like, Mark, really? Like, I knew you from one community. This is completely separate from everything else.
Right.
And then talked to this guy. I was like, you know Mark? He's like, yeah, I know Mark. I'm like, wow,
that's crazy. Okay, so what's executive protection? That's what you do for work currently?
Currently, yeah. Okay. So it's the technical term for bodyguard. So it's private security, usually high profile clients.
Okay.
High profile events and things like that. Yeah.
So is that all over the U.S. or specifically to SoCal right now?
Yeah, it is condensed more in SoCal because of the clientele.
I'm sure.
There are spots of it around the country. Like, you'll get a lot in New York. You get some in Chicago, probably Atlanta.
It's not like you're going to Nebraska,
LA.
right?
No, I mean, the few that are there are going to be completely different industry too, right? Like Southern California is going to be your celebrity primarily.
Okay.
You get some corporate and whatnot.
Yeah.
There's a ton of corporate up in the Bay Area because of all the big tech that's up there.
Oh, I never thought
So you
about
get
that.
a lot of executive protection in that.
I'm sure.
And then what I'm looking at when I was looking at Texas, if I were to continue doing it out there, it tends to be in Houston and Dallas because of all the oil industry. So it's really just the clientele. And then Tennessee, you get the music industry. So it just depends on where it's at.
I never thought about that, dude.
Yeah.
I never, so I'm sure, those oil industry guys are making a lot of money right now.
They are. Yeah.
They're crushing it.
Yeah.
But that's cool because you're moving out there pretty soon. So that means you're still is that something you're still gonna be involved in when you go to Texas? You're looking to get into something else?
I'm looking at getting into something else. I can still do it here and there. Like if someone calls us like, hey, I have a client traveling here, I can meet them there and do that. But I'm not gonna do it as my primary. It's definitely a single man's game. You know, you can make a lot of good money, but you're gonna be traveling a lot. You're gonna have a lot of cool experiences, but to try and come home and either have a wife or family, it's like you're barely going to be sleeping at home.
Yeah, I had a friend sort of along the same lines. I'm not going to say a celebrity, but it was a pretty big name celebrity. He's like, yeah, dude, my Christmases, Thanksgivings, holiday, everything he's like, spent with them. And he said the same thing. He's like, it's great money, but I don't have a life. My life is his life.
Right.
When he's gone, and he's gone all the time because he's a pretty high profile dude, I'm
right.
Like, damn. But when he told me those paychecks, I was like, yo, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some people making some high six figures for security.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like few and far between, but it's exactly that. You don't have a personal life.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing that for?
Close to 7 years now.
Oh, so you got some time under your belt. Wow, dude.
So,
have you ever thought about doing like police officer stuff? Or
I thought about it. It's just there's like federal agencies I've looked at. There's police departments. There's military units. But for one reason or another, they just never worked out. You know, I was never like. I've applied to certain things and gone a couple different routes. A lot of things just kind of fell through the cracks, and no one replied or responded. Never failed out of anything. Or was disqualified, but for some reason or another, the doors just didn't open.
Yeah, it just didn't work out.
But very clearly open to do some executive protection stuff. I was like, all right, this isn't exactly the route I want to go, but if you want me to work full-time for this client, and then all of a sudden I'm traveling the world, it's like, all right, I can come back to the others. This is a rare opportunity.
I would say that's it. Yeah, in that business, you've had to have made some pretty good contacts, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Huh? I mean, that's 7 years in and you're working some pretty high profile stuff. That's got to be good for your future in some way.
Oh yeah. Especially because it's still part of the industry, whether it's paramilitary or whatever you want to call it, just on the private side, because it's not government run at all. But, because you're dealing with everyone who is, because the people who are in this industry are either former military, former or current law enforcement, or martial artists. I mean, and that's the whole industry saturated in that. So it's like you make a lot of contacts with these guys, and it's like, oh, I work with a dude that was this PD or that was this agency or this department. It's like you can find somebody.
Wow.
So
dang, man. 7 years of that, dude.
yeah,
That's a long time, man. It's a long time. Now, were you with you're married, correct?
yeah. I got married in January.
Yo, dude, congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
huge, man.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
So I waited till I was 35.
You're fine, bro. I'm one divorce down. It's all good, dude.
I think someone made a post not too long ago I saw, and I was like, that's probably true. And it was just like, if you waited this long to get married, you statistically avoided your first divorce.
I mean,
like,
yeah. I mean, I think somebody showed me a statistic a while ago. I want to say it's well over half now. Marriages, I think it's like 60 in the 60s.
it's probably climbing to the 60s.
Yeah, it's pretty high up there. Mostly like pretty much your first marriage, you're gonna end up divorced. I was like, dude, that's
statistically.
sucks.
Yeah, statistically.
I mean, it's got to depend the circumstances of what's happening, but
Sure.
I mean, it just is what it is. But
I wonder if that's regional too. I wonder if those statistics take into account like a place like LA where it's a couple million people,
right?
And the dating scene is completely different than what it is in a rural area in another state.
True. You're traveled a lot. I've traveled often, right? When you come back here to LA, it's just different with the men and women, right? It's definitely more, people are more well put together, way more fit, a lot more revealing clothing, right? Everyone's trying to be that next thing, right? So your temptation's high, bro. There's a lot out there, right? Whereas, okay, hey, I'm going to go to San Antonio, Texas, next week. It's like, right. They're still good looking people, but it's not the caliber of like coming to LA,
right?
Living in SoCal, right? Because it seems like, at least here, everyone's kind of like keeping up with the Joneses. It's a rat race. Who's got the next nice car? Who's the sexiest on Instagram? It's just kind of from traveling a lot and doing stuff to the U.S. You just see like it's like New York, L.A. and some of these hotspots. It's just like
it is, and it's weird because you'd think if you're trying to meet someone, you're like, oh, it must be a great place because there's tons of people. It has this opposite effect where there's this analysis paralysis where you have too many choices or too many options, and so you don't end up picking any.
Right.
And that's what LA is. It's like crazy because you look around, it's like, wow, there's so many people that are so attractive, both men and women. And why is everyone single?
Yeah.
And like, because there's always the next best thing. That's why.
Well, God, there's a song by J. Cole, dude. Love the one. I think it's like Love the One You Got. But he talks about there's always going to be a badder bitch on tour. It's just like, I tell people like, grass is green on the side. Well, if yours brown, why don't you just water it?
Right.
Make it better.
Right.
It'll just get better. So, I mean, because I hate to say it, but there's always going to be another person and temptation and all that stuff. It's like, dude, just lock it down.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I've been victim to that too, especially with the dating apps and whatnot. It's just like, oh, there's this and there's that, and what about this other person that I'm talking to? And you always have that option open, where unless you meet someone in person where you both have that unique connection, it's really hard to go off of the platform of everything else.
Right.
And I actually met my wife through Bumble.
Oh, no way. Okay, so I've never done dating apps, but Bumble's where she needs to reach out to you, right?
She has to open the conversation, otherwise the match expires.
What's your wife's name?
Kendall.
Well done, lady. I like that. You're a good woman. That's cool, dude. Yeah. So you guys probably hit it off pretty quick.
Yeah, we did. And I was actually living in Santa Barbara, and she was in South Orange County. We were like 3 hours away.
And you guys made it work.
But I had come home one weekend to my parents' house, which put me in the proximity bubble of her down in Orange County. And we had matched. And then she sent a message. And usually with Bumble, when the woman's the first one to send a message, it's usually, hey. Like they do the bare minimum. They're like, oh, you're going to put the ball in my court? Yeah, let me put it back in your court. It's true.
I know. And then we hear the guys, we're just like, well, what do I text her? Like, hey, so how's your day going? It's... I know.
Yeah. And so, but she was different because her message, she had seen something I had. I linked my Spotify. So she saw my music.
Oh.
And so because of some of the music I listened to, she was like, because I had a bunch of like worship music on there.
Okay.
And so, because a lot of people will put their religion and stuff like that. And usually when you talk to people, it's just there because it's an option you can put on there.
Okay.
And so she was actually looking for someone who like took their faith more serious and saw that I, in my Spotify, was listening to worship. So she was like, this guy isn't just saying he's Christian. I think he's acting
really
more
cool,
on this.
man.
And so she reached out to me and was just like, oh, you listen to this band?
Yeah.
And the band was actually the band from a church I was going to at the time that I was actually on the worship team there for a bit.
Oh, right
and so
on,
she's
dude.
like, oh, you listen to this band? And I was like, I kind of know them, and we just hit it off. And our first date was like 8 hours.
That's cool, dude.
We went to lunch and then ended up at a coffee shop, and I pretty much called it because I was like, I got a 3-hour drive back home. Like, I got to go at some point, And then our second date was like 14 hours.
Whoa.
So we definitely hit it off.
That's cool, dude.
Real well, yeah.
Wow. So she's a believer then,
Yes.
just like you are.
Yeah.
Now, have you had your faith your entire life, or is it something that you've kind of grown into as an adult?
Both. I grew up in the church because I was raised in the church. But it definitely went through a transition. And I feel like it's been through 2 transitions over the years. One about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And then one my senior year in high school. So I had grown up with it in the sense that like, this is what I was taught. This is what you're supposed to believe. But it wasn't a personal thing. It was just kind of knowledge. It was like,
I feel you on that one.
yeah.
I feel you on that one. I think I've had, 2 different phases as well. It's one of those things where I grew up in the church as well, but I never really made it my own.
Right.
And I think, for people listening to this podcast, you can hear me working through my faith.
Yeah.
I talk about stuff, and I'll go off, and I still cuss, stupid joke, whatever it may be. I think I have a more grittier type faith. But I think through my adult life, and I'm not gonna lie, I have a good life. I've been blessed with a lot. I've worked, I've worked hard for a lot of what I have, but you start realizing there's got to be more to this life than just going to work and making money and being successful. I've been able to make a lot of money, and I've also not had a lot of money, and life was still the same.
Yeah.
You still had problems and issues and days that just absolutely sucked.
Yeah.
And just as of late, recently for me, my mortality was brought to the forefront of my face real quick. And then I started really questioning, like, yo, dude, like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
It absolutely stressed me out a lot, kind of crushing at some point. But then it just makes you think, you're like, you know what? I give up. I got to give this to you right now because I don't know what else to do. I have no clue what's going on. I don't know why. I think this sucks, but there's got to be a plan, a purpose behind this.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of like you say like the same thing, dude. It wasn't like this overnight conversion type thing. It's been years. Years where I've had to kind of learn things easy way, hard way.
Right.
And I think too with me being a firefighter, maybe even you being in the military service, from the things that we see and people suffering, you're just kind of like, man, what's going on out here? What's going on in this universe? There's got to be some answers,
Right.
So it's interesting to hear you talk about your faith and even with you meeting your wife. So, and that's cool to see you both are believers. I think that's just beautiful and awesome, dude. You're going to have a solid future ahead, you guys. But how did that play into your book? Your faith, and then also, because it's always interesting being in the military, right?
Right.
And you're fighting for your country, but you're also having to do certain things to protect your country that some people might not agree with.
Right.
It's like, well, if you're a believer, how can you do that? Now, is that something that you talk about in this book?
It is. Yeah, that's actually one of the big reasons why I wanted to write it was a lot of my experience after, because I had already been working through my faith my whole life, whether it's just learning the knowledge or learning to make it, personal through high school, and then obviously the challenges with the Marine Corps and just the overall transition. So it was just constantly progressing and learning and understanding and trying to make sense of it. Because honestly, joining the military, it was like, okay, I know this is real, but I don't feel it. And it was like that for a while because the world was just upside down. I mean, the death, the destruction, everything. It was like, I don't know what's going on, God, but I'm just gonna keep trying to read this. I'm the worst person at applying this, and even looking like a Christian. And it was just a lot of I don't know for a long time. I just got to the point of just bare minimum of like, I'm just going to keep going because it's what I know to do. And honestly, it was reduced to that a lot of the time where it was like, yeah, I don't know, couldn't really tell you why.
Yeah.
Where else am I supposed to go? You know, there's like a verse that sticks out to me with Peter when Jesus is asking him, you know, all these his followers have left him.
Yeah.
And he's about to face his death. You know, when he comes to his disciples, it's like, well, you know, what about you? Are you going to leave too? And he's just like, where are we going to go?
Yeah.
And it was that, you know, a lot of my faith journey has been that. You know, I think a lot of people it is. It's just that pain, that suffering. And that's that breaking point of like rock bottom of like, I don't know where this is going to go. And so I'm either just going to trust you and it's going to work out, or I'm going to walk away from it. Right. Yeah. And that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey, you know, and it doesn't mean that like God is done with them.
Yeah.
But it's a human thing. Like a lot of people are just done with God at those points.
Yeah. It's almost like prodigal son status.
Yeah.
Know?
Right.
You know, it's like, I know I walked away for a long time.
Yeah.
I was doing my own thing, dude. And like I said, I got a lot of news past couple of weeks, and I was just like, dude, my life got flipped upside down, and I'm just like, oh my God, what? You get to a point where you just like, I can't do this alone. I'm emotionally broken right now.
Right.
I need help. I'm just remember laying in my bed like, please do something. Like I can't, this is the weight of this right now. What I'm going through is too much for me to emotionally handle.
Right.
Like, I've denied you for a long time, but I'm acknowledging right now, and you need to fucking do something straight. You know, it's just like, I'm going to be super real with you right now.
Yeah.
Like what's going on. And over the, you know, time and, I have been finding peace that kind of surpasses this understanding that we know as humans.
Right.
You know, you don't know where we know where it's coming from. When you got nothing left and you're praying from your heart, bro, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, you do start to get rest and you start to think, okay, you know what? I'm going to work through this. I'm going to see what the doctors say. And from here on out, I'm just going to let it go. That's the best I can do. You know? So it's interesting. I love talking with people about their faith. Yeah. Because especially how we were raised. Right. You know, you're raised in all this and you believe, you have this, well, you're taught this faith, but you don't really make it your own. Then you become an adult, we do our thing, we move on, you're like, whatever. And then life hits you. Life will come at you quick, dude. Right. And you're just like, what? I'm like, I remember told somebody the other day, I'm like, dude, nobody in church or in high school ever prepared me for what the hell I was going to go through in this adult life. Yeah. And that's one thing I was frustrated with going through the military or coming out after it too was, you know, when it did become personal, when I connected with that and connected with God in a way that made me want to pursue this daily on my own. Yeah. That was one of the first things that came to my head. It was like, why didn't anyone tell me? Mm-hmm. Why was the church so bad at communicating this, right? And then it pointed me down the route of like why so many things are disconnected there, and there's theological implications on that, and we just don't have that positive leadership widespread. It's out there, but it's really not in every church like you think it should be. Yeah. You know, and you really do have to search for the places that have the core theological foundations there in order for there to be something there. Yeah. But anyway, getting back to what you were saying, in writing this, that was a big point for me because there was actually one conversation that just stuck with me for a long time. A year after I got out, I hadn't started at Azusa Pacific yet, but there was a gal I met at a coffee shop, and asked her out, got her number. We went on a couple of dates, and then one of the dates, the politics came up, right? And I was like, I don't really care about politics. Like, I don't. Everyone's got their opinions, and you know what I mean? We can disagree, but they're not make or break for me. Right. But she goes into this conversation, and she's just like, oh, so you were in the military? I was like, yeah. And she didn't ask what branch, what I did, just, oh, you're in the military? And then came the scripted response. And it was just like, well, I don't see how you can be a Christian and be in the military. And I was like, all right, fair question. But where are you coming from with that? Are you saying that it's difficult, or you think it's a contradiction? She's like, no, I think it's a contradiction. Like, I don't see how you can just go off and kill people and think you're a Christian. And I was like, all right, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. Have you ever read the Old Testament?
Yeah, I'm thinking like, have you read the Bible?
Yeah, there's a lot of battles.
You know,
in there.
like, yeah, that's not outside the realm of what's going on.
We believe and serve a very fierce and beautiful God. And if you look in the Old Testament, when he asked King David and other people in the Old Testament, to wipe out full on cities.
Right.
He meant everything.
Right.
Their cattle or whatever you want, their goats, the women, children, everybody.
Right.
They're all gone. And I'm thinking, do you guys remember also the flood? Everybody died.
Right.
I'm talking everybody except for Noah and his family.
Yeah. And those are a lot of the things I explored in this because of that, and I didn't even want to go into it with her at this point. I was like, I don't want to go out with you anymore.
Well, you can tell she's definitely closed-minded.
Yeah, and was obviously more politically driven than she was
Right.
theologically driven. You know, because if she had read scripture, she could have been like, hey, I have a hard time processing this. How do you see this? But it was just like, I didn't even tell you that I was in the Marine Corps or that I was infantry.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to give you the benefit of the doubt because, your assumption there is kind of correct.
Right.
But just off on your approach. So I was like, I just don't want to deal with this. But it really made me think for a while. I was just like, why do so many people see it or think about it this way? I can understand the emotional aspect of it, right? Like violence is a very difficult thing to process through. It's just not part of our being. It's obviously a part of human history, but we still have a repulsion to it. And so I was like, well, how do we reconcile this with faith? And so that was the whole goal of this book, was that concept of there's a necessity to it, right? And so I really had to do my research on the history of it through like a biblical lens and see, okay, where is this appropriate? Where can we use this? And I explored all those things. The first half is my experience in Iraq, just to kind of give my personal account of the kind of violence and things that I experienced. But the second half is all the theological implications and discussion. And one of the chapters is God and violence that really goes through biblical history on that. And I'm not a theologian, but I did my research as best I could to find a consistent storyline of what's happening, right? And what you see is, where does this come about, right? Because if you start from the beginning, taking the like Christian biblical view of this Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
You've got Adam and Eve, and then you have the fall, and then you have really the first generation of humans to come from that. Immediately it goes to murder.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Like Cain and Abel.
Like, dude,
straight up.
Just the fall and then murder, right? It was like disobedience toward God, death.
Yeah.
Like not even a couple generations down, right? And it was looking at that more deeply, and you follow the line of Cain a couple generations, and you get to the first craftsman of metal objects, which start to credit it toward really the first weapons of war. And so you see how sin progresses, and it's like it's interesting to watch that. And then, I don't know how many generations it is until you get to Noah, and then you get to, all right, the world has become so corrupt, it's irreconcilable. And I think it's Genesis 6:5 where he says that, where he basically says like everything in the human heart is corrupt to the point where that's all it thinks about all the time.
Wow.
And that's when he calls Noah and is like, all right, look, here's what's going to happen. And that's not just a story we know. What stood out to me is when I really did the history of it is like, when you take that into account, the people who say, well, how can you be a Christian and be in the military and this and like that? And it's like, let's just go to that for a second and realize that God has the biggest body count in history.
Yo.
So,
I mean, it's true. Yeah.
So
I never thought about that.
Right.
I've never thought it in that way.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It really is interesting.
And when you look at it theologically, like even more so than what the Bible would say about the devil, right? Because when you look at it, we understand the devil's influence or the sin and that whole spiritual warfare side. But when you look at the actual account of how many people has Satan killed, I think there's like one.
I've never thought about looking into that.
Yeah, and I forgot what it was, but it was just like, I think the only time he's really been allowed to is with Job, right? And taking certain people and whatnot.
But it's something about that book of Job, dude.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild, dude.
Yeah.
You're a better man than me, dude.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, so there's like, in contrast, when you look at just the aspect of violence in this world, not the spiritual warfare stuff, but in this world, yeah, God's got the biggest body count in history. Above any dictator, above Hitler, above all these people, he flooded the earth. I mean, you're talking scorched earth policy.
Right.
God's done it.
Wow.
Right? But if he's sovereign and he's just, then you understand there is a justice component to it. And so we can't separate the violence from everything and just look at it within a bubble and then make our own moral judgments against it. You know, it's like, okay, let's look at the full narrative. And what's interesting that I noticed going through this progression was, you know, violence was banned. Like you couldn't harm people through the Old Testament. And God had the monopoly on that. He was like, nope, it's not allowed. Get through the flood. And then it was after the flood that you see the first instance of, okay, now we're at the point where I've restored humanity through whom I've considered to be righteous, which is Noah and his family. And that's where you see the law come into place where he says, now it's the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of thing, where it's just like, if anyone sheds man blood, then his blood shall be shed. And then this is really the first area where God gives the authority for this type of violence. And so you start to see a progression. That's what I noticed in doing the research on this was it goes from only God's allowed to up to a certain point, and then he slowly gives us a little bit of that authority. And the more people take on his character and likeness, right? Because you go from that to, I'm trying to think, from Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and then the slavery in Egypt to Moses, right? You're talking about like thousands of years from the fall to this. There's a slow progression where God slowly bestows the authority for violence or to kill or to take life. And where you see it more prominently is once the Israelites have spent their time in the wilderness, it was to build them up in God's character, right? Because it says there was a direct route when they left. They could have gone into the promised land, but they didn't. They wandered in the desert for 40 years. That's because he said if they go through the land of the Philistines who are warriors, then the Israelites will just return to Egypt. They're run because they're not. And so what's happening in Egypt isn't just 40 years. It's for them to develop that character. That's what that wilderness is. And when they develop that character, they're also becoming a warrior nation. And so when they come out of it, historically what's happening is now he's turning them into warriors.
Wow.
Which is when they go out and they take the land by force.
Right.
And so if you follow the full progression, it's no violence is allowed to a certain point, then God gives that authority in limited cases, self-defense and things like that. But where you see it become no longer a defensive use, but an offensive use of force is when he builds up this nation under his own image and name, then he can send them out to take this land by force kind of thing, right? And he doesn't just take the land and then give it to them and say, hey, it's yours now. It's like they fought for it. Right. So violence has always been a part of that story, right? And you can follow that to today where we have governments established for civil law and things like that. And so really violence falls under the authority of our governments and things like that. It's not an individual use thing aside from maybe self-defense. But that was really something that I dug out of that question. People are like, how can you be a Christian and be in the military or do violence? It's like, well, I don't know, but let me explore this. And that was really a lot of the point of this book was to get through the faith explanation on that and trying to find that balance.
Steve, you're a deep human being, my friend. Wow. No, that was beautiful, dude. And you bring up a lot of good points. And one thing you talked about too, the Israelites and how they wandered for so long, but how God was building them up. I think how many times in my life where it's like, God, why am I in this position? Why is this happening? But then years later, you look back and you're kind of like, oh, I get it now. You're like, I see what you were doing, but that really, really sucked during that time. Yeah. But, and I said this to a friend the other day. We were talking and I'm like, look, man, I know you're in a tough spot in what you're going through, but doesn't mean God's left you. I believe there's a purpose behind everything that happens in our lives. And I know that I strongly believe that even though something bad can happen to you or you do something bad, God can still turn graves into gardens. And what was once ashes, he can turn to beauty. I've seen it in my own life personally. I have made massive mistakes. I really have. And, I've wanted forgiveness and to move on and just my life to be better. You put forth that work and it does. You realize, hey, you know what? There is a way out of this. I can do better, It's really cool that you brought up the Israelites thing, man. I had never thought of it like that. I remember that story growing up,
Yeah, and I've heard the stories too, but like looking at it from a certain angle, and I was specifically looking at it through the violence aspect, right? Like I was looking for certain context of where does this come into play. There's ton more when it comes to really like what's happening and building the story of Jesus to come for the New Testament, right? Like all scripture goes together. But looking at it from the aspect of violence was really interesting because it was just a lot of history and seeing actually this isn't separate from God. Like there was a point where God was the only person to do this because he was the only one with the righteousness to enforce that justice. And what's interesting is it's not just that God slowly starts to bestow that authority on us to use violence. What he's doing is he's allowing us to be enforcers of his justice. And so what I saw was that the more we develop his character, the more we can be entrusted with executing divine justice, right? And when you think of that from like a governmental civil aspect, it really makes you understand the connection between faith and government and law and things like that, because you go, oh, okay, if we're connected to the moral source of this or the moral authority, then that's really the only way we're going to start to see positive change in the communities is when we're coming from God's source, because we are coming from his character.
Right. Man.
So
You're a deep human being, bro. I love this, dude. So, okay, so everybody knows, when did you finish this book? When was it published?
it was published February 18th of this year. So
okay, so this book is
little
like
over
hot
a month
off
and a
the
half
shelf.
ago. Yeah.
Okay, I want to show it again. We're going to show it too before we wrap up in a little bit, but beautiful. Calloused Heart. Steve Sanderson. Steve J. Sanderson.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write this?
On and off, 7 years.
So this book was a 7-year process for you.
Yeah, I wanted to write something in 2014, and I started to write some random thoughts down for a while just to get in the habit of writing. I had no idea what it was going to be. And so for a couple of years, it was just a bunch of random files on my computer until I sat down in 2017 and was like, all right, this needs a direction. It needs consistency. If you're going to put something together that's 200 to 300 pages, there has to be, this can't just be a compilation of like blog posts. You know, you
want to make it legit.
You got to write something.
It sounds like you did the research. I mean, the way you explain things to me, even growing up in church and faith, I'm just like, man, I personally can't wait to read this. I just finished a book called The Furious Longing of God.
Okay.
Great book, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, just very powerful book. And I started this other one by a Navy SEAL that was a gift for me on Christmas. But dude, I'm gonna hit this up.
Awesome.
Man. What would you say to somebody who wants to write a book? Because it seems like 7 years, that's a long process, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like you took it extremely serious. You did your research. I don't know if, like you said, if it was a passion or you felt like it was a calling, but you finished it. You did it. I think that's huge. You didn't give up. It may have taken 7 years, but you didn't give up. And I feel like there are people out there that want to pursue like write music or write books. Right. But they get started and it's like, oh, this is tough, right? And then they stop. Like what would you say to somebody who wants to start pursuing writing and doing this in the process of getting it done? Yeah.
Have a good outline. If you're going to write a book, that was the thing that tripped me up is for years I didn't have an outline of what it was going to be.
Okay.
And so when I really sat down to put in the time writing and learning the discipline of it, that was hard enough in itself. But I realized that when I was writing stuff, I was like, this is 2-3 pages and that's it. Like what else are you going to do with this? Like you need 200 pages. And it was like, that's not going to be 200 pages on that. And so I really had to step back and look at the bigger picture of, well, you need to figure out what point you're trying to communicate, what audience you're trying to communicate to, and have an outline for how you're going to explain whatever that central point is. And it was just the skeletal structure of that was like, okay, now I can see the full scope of this project. Okay. I need to reset. And so that's why in 2017, I had a whole reset and then took a lot of those individual writings and incorporated them in there. But it wasn't until I had the skeletal structure of where it was going. I see. So it's definitely a process. It's not something you just, I'm just going to write a book. Like you really need to think about what you're doing. Yeah, it's like figure out what point you want to communicate, who you want to communicate it to, and then find a good structure for it. It's really just the baseline, right? Because otherwise it's like you go off on tangents about things. Yeah. But you got to remember who you're speaking to and how that audience is going to receive it, what the point is, right? And obviously something that you're interested in that you want to speak on, whether you have whatever authority or what on it, doesn't matter what your degrees are. If you have something, people are going to want to hear it. Yeah. So, yeah. Now, lastly, one thing I do want to ask is
from coming back from being in war to doing the private security you're doing to now, would you say your faith has definitely grown stronger?
It has.
Or is it maybe deeper or just a better understanding?
It's both. It's deeper in the sense of all the experiences that I've had have deepened it. My knowledge is more just from staying in it for so many years and just continuing to study it. You just collect so much, and then you start to connect the dots on it, and it continues to strengthen it, or deepen it, I guess. But what I wasn't prepared for getting out in the military was the transition. Cause I had that mindset like, oh, well, I'll be home, I'll be good. I won't have the stress. But what you don't realize is there's a relational aspect you have that is part of your spiritual, and everyday health. And so I didn't have that getting out, right? I had now connected to a new community with a certain amount of values and a certain culture that went along with it. And that contrasted with the community that I was now a part of, right? Because it was like dark humor, swearing, complaining all the time,
Right.
Very just adrenaline, just everyone's working hard, sleeping in the dirt. And you get out and it's just like, everyone's fragile and you can't say that because it offends people.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, this is not my community. And so there's just a lot of frustration and anger for years. And it's the same thing, like just swearing all the time. Like I still do. I am gotten a lot better with it. But a lot of it wasn't people pointing it out. It was just realizing how harsh I was around people. And it wasn't necessarily their fault, but it was just like, I was so out of place.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't have anything in common with you. And it wasn't just the age thing. It was just life experience. It was just, I didn't care about anything they cared about.
Right. So it's like almost like the stuff they're talking about is so trivial compared to coming back from war, I mean, gosh, dude.
Yeah, and it's just like I'm walking around trying to watch my back constantly because I know someone out there might do something, and then everyone else is talking about like what shampoo they want, and I'm just like, I'm checked out of that conversation. I just don't care.
Yeah, I got you, man. No. Well, Steve, dude, thank you so much for coming by the podcast. And one last time, so everyone can see his book that he wrote. There it is, Calloused Heart by Stephen J. Sanderson. Go get it now, pretty much anywhere, right?
Yep.
Love it, dude. Thank you so much for coming by the studio, man. I'm really glad that Mark suggested you come on here, dude. Thank you for your service, dude. I have a huge heart for veterans. I come from a military home. You've been through a lot, but you have so much ahead of you. That's great. I'm excited for your marriage, for this book. I hope you write another book. I'm going to read this and pass on to my family and friends. And if there's anything you ever need, man, please don't be afraid. You are considered one of us, dude.
Yeah,
we got your back. Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And this challenge coin is for you, my friend.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you for coming by.
Love it.
And, dude, all the best in Texas, man.
Yeah,
I hope your life is more than you ever thought it was going to be, dude, and your future is bright. So
thank you.
Keep at it, brother. And let's go on 3, okay?
All right.
1, 2, 3. Let's go. Bye, everybody. And that's it. Thank you for listening in, everybody. I'd like to thank our sound engineer who makes this podcast happen and makes us sound very good, Stephen Clark. And to our first sponsor, 89 Barbers. Look good, feel good, be great. Come get your haircut at 2 locations, Long Beach and in Orange, California. Your appointment can be booked at 89barbers.com. That is EIGHTNINEBARBRERS. 89barbers.com. Again, look good, feel good, be great. Check it out. It's my barber. He is the man. Thanks, everybody. Bye.